just because you're a PharmD doesn't mean like you're like every other PharmD also. So you might have gone to the same pharmacy school, you might live in the same town as someone else, but your perspective and the way that you think and what you can provide is going to be different. And so don't put yourself out of the running.
Dr. Swathi Varanasi is someone that you need to know. She has such an interesting, unique career in pharmacy, and she's a good friend of mine, and I think you're going to learn a lot from her unusual journey that has led to such a huge impact on the world. Dr. Swathi, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. What a nice intro.
Well, you're doing some really cool things, and so you weren't always in this cool position you are today. Life is a journey. So tell us about your background and where you started to get to where you are today.
Growing up, I was around, Ayurvedic herbs and kind of natural healing remedies, and we used those in the house just as often as we used, over-the-counter prescription options. So to me, healing health and wellness was always this intersection or like interplay of all these different modalities. It wasn't just limited to, one side or the other, like really the way that integrative health gets talked about now, where so many people in integrative health are anti-prescription. And, as an educated pharmacist, someone who went to pharmacy school, did a residency, like I fully believe and see the value in prescription medications, in over-the-counters, all of that. However, I don't think that that should be the only option. And at the end of the day, to me, it's patient-centered shared decision-making, which in short is being a guide as the healthcare professional and demonstrating that there's so many potential options for each patient, and trying to figure out as a team with the patient which one vibes with their lifestyle, what works for them, and really what helps them achieve their overall treatment goals. So, if someone comes to me and they're like a night shift worker and they're saying they're having issues sleeping, I'm not going to talk about sleep hygiene and turning off, your phone at 10 p.m. because they're working, right? So it's very patient specific. And I think that as healthcare professionals, as pharmacists, to be equipped with all the background about all these different possibilities, then we can really paint a full comprehensive picture of what's possible for a patient, and then they can figure out what works for them.
So what's your history in pharmacy? How did you get to being this advocate and powerhouse?
Yeah, so, growing up, as I mentioned, I was around all of these different options. So I thought going to pharmacy school would be a great option for me because, thinking about, even just, my vision of pharmacy when I was growing up was, there were pharmacists that would stand in a pharmacy. They stood right between the supplements and all the other options, as well as the prescriptions. So to me, I thought I was going to get, quite a well-rounded experience of the preventative and the curative side, which, as we both know, it's really kind of focused on one versus the other. And so throughout pharmacy school, one of my biggest pieces of advice, which I'm sure we'll come up to next, is just try anything, try everything. You never know what's going to fit for you. And so that's what I did in pharmacy school. Instead, while all my friends were, working in pharmacies and they were pharmacy interns, I was doing clinical research on a phase 3 clinical trial. I was working on like a lab spectroscopy experiment with rodent research. I was interning with a biotech company. I worked in the startup space, also in the startup kind of community in Charleston, South Carolina. So I was always out there trying all these different things, doing a lot of volunteer work, and all of that. And so that kind of brought me to this intersection of, at the end of pharmacy school, realizing that, I want to do something in the integrative space, or I want to do something innovative and different. I just wasn't quite sure exactly what that would look like. And so I found a mentor out in LA, which is where I moved for quite a few years after pharmacy school, because I had a chance to do an appy rotation with her. We clicked, and, within a few days of the rotation, I was like, this is what I've been searching for, a pharmacist who believes in quote unquote both sides, or like the entire spectrum of health, and really thinks about the science and the evidence-based perspective behind all of it. And so I asked her, would you ever consider bringing on an apprentice or something like that? And, one conversation led to another, and it became, us starting the first ever and still only postdoctoral residency training program for pharmacists interested in entering this integrative space, which, I say is unconventional. I hope one day I will not refer to it as unconventional, but at least for now, that is how I still refer to it, because it's still, not the norm. And so, that's how I ended up, training with her at both an independent natural pharmacy as well as an integrative interdisciplinary clinic. And from there, really found that I loved the education space. And there was honestly such a void in the education space of the science behind all these different modalities. And so that's kind of informed a lot of my decisions moving forward with, consulting with different brands on product formulation, embarking on, opportunities in med tech and health tech, consumer initiated testing. So I've done a lot of different things, but I've always just gone off and tried something new and learned from that experience what I liked, what I didn't like. And then I took that to the next experience after that and tried something else completely different and new.
I love that you have the ability to do that, because it feels like so many in healthcare are like, they want to try something new, but feel so scared that like, okay, whatever I try is risky and it has to work. Otherwise it's a waste of time, and like really so worried to try something new. Whereas you and I are like, oh, bring on all the new stuff. How many new things can I try? And like fast and furious to figure out what we like, what we don't like very quickly, rather than sitting and waiting, wringing our hands, wondering like, what's that one perfect thing out there for me? Because it feels like you can't know unless you try. And that leads me to the conversation I really want to have with you today, Dr. Swathi, is both of us believe that pharmacy is still a good career option, but you have to think about it differently than we've thought about it in the past. And I think how pharmacy schools are still teaching it now, that to succeed and make pharmacy work for you today, you got to do three things. And one is that you don't bank on traditional roles. Yes, you can use them to serve you and your family to get a good financial footing, but you can't bank on them always being there. Two, you got to make yourself stand out in the world. You can't blend in. One of your biggest resources is to make yourself stand out by standing up for something. And number three is to just help people in a new way. I'm always saying, I don't want to improve healthcare. I want to change healthcare radically and make it something completely different rather than 1% better. And so I want to talk with you through the lens of your experience and the companies that you formed and the way you've impacted the world to make, what was the list you made? Top 50 most influential pharmacy leaders. I want to talk about your experience on these 3 points, because we both agree that you need these 3 things to make pharmacy a good career option. So Dr. Swathi, let's talk about the first one, on not banking on traditional roles. It sounds like that's something you've been really good at from the beginning, that you're curious about all sorts of roles and hungry to learn from them. What's your experience, and what advice do you have on not thinking traditional roles of the past will serve us well in the future?
So I think, just as you mentioned, like really what you talked about is that they're still educating pharmacy students that like you get this education, you enter a pharmacy, you enter a hospital, and then you check some boxes and call it a day. And I think that that's kind of the root of the issue, is that, students are not being presented other opportunities and other options. Because, in pharmacy school, I looked at it and I think I was very different from most people who entered pharmacy school, because most pharmacists I knew growing up, I saw the few that, stood in the pharmacies. That was inspiring to me, between the supplements and the prescriptions. But the pharmacists I actually knew as family friends were either business owners, like they owned independent pharmacies. So to me, that was like, wow, they have their own business. They're like forging their own path. They're doing it the way they want to. They're not necessarily working for, a set path or a set chain, if you will. So that was, really exciting to me. And then the other people I knew were kind of in the, med tech, biotech space. Again, like forging the path, innovating. They're working on like the newest, most exciting drugs. And, to me, I always saw pharmacy school as a way that I can build tools in my toolbox, not necessarily as like a set path. So I think I kind of came at it with a different perspective. And, throughout all of pharmacy school, that's one of the reasons, honestly, if I'm being transparent, why I never even pursued a pharmacy intern position at a pharmacy, because I never saw myself there, even from the beginning. I always knew that being a pharmacist to me was, one of the best skill sets you can have. and you're taught that in school, but it's, I think, the reframe of everything you're learning that's the most important. Because you can take all of those tools and realize, wow, I have this clinical knowledge. I understand, how to evaluate primary literature. I'm taught how to write, even though I think that some of that needs some, enhancement. I do think that we're still taught something about that. We're taught about, managing teams, even though I also think that that should be amplified as well. But I think that certain things like this that we're taught in school, like even, voicing your opinion on an interdisciplinary team, on an appy rotation, like that's such an important skill that you're going to be able to need to work on any collaborative team moving forward. So I think the reframe of all these amazing things that we learn and amazing things we do in pharmacy school is so important because there's so many ways you can apply them. And so thinking outside of the box in the most, I guess, stereotypical way of saying that, but it's really like thinking outside of the set path and how you can use some of these skills. Because I think that's one of the things I come across with pharmacists too, is that they're like, oh, I have these skills and they translate to working in a pharmacy or in a hospital. And I'm like, but what else can you do with those skills? Because I think pharmacy, and I still stand by this, pharmacy is one of the most versatile career paths because of what you're taught and the way you can apply it.
And that's what's so key. Where were you in 2009 when I was an intern? Swathi, I needed you because that's all. I felt like PharmD equals licensed pharmacist. And that's all I could do was be a licensed pharmacist and apply for licensed pharmacist positions. And now being on the other side of entrepreneurship and identifying more with a PharmD rather than a specific licensure has opened up my whole world. And I think people just don't know that like PharmD doesn't have to equal licensed pharmacist for the rest of your life. And you're in charge of exploring how are you going to take that education and that critical thinking you learned that sets you apart from 99% of people on planet Earth because you have a doctorate degree. How are you going to use that to create a future of your dreams that resonates with you rather than, oh, I have a doctor of pharmacy degree and this clinical experience. What job can I get? It's thinking the wrong way entirely, but it's how almost everyone thinks.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also thinking about, any step of your educational journey like that. You're just adding all these tools and experiences. So maybe, I interact with a lot of pharmacists who are, overworking in retail. And I'm like, but think about everything you learned in retail and how you can use those transferable skills to your next role. Because a lot of people will come to me and say, oh, I want to transition to, entrepreneurship, or I want to transition to, doing something in biotech. But all I have is my pharmacy experience of 7 years. I'm like, you have 7 years of like managing a team, dealing with like difficult deadlines. Like think about all the things that you're used to doing and how you can use that experience to your advantage in anything that you go to. And, maybe someone's listening to this who's not in pharmacy school even yet. And, I think that that's also really important to think about. Even in undergrad, I wasn't just thinking about, okay, like I knew I wanted to do something in healthcare. I knew I wanted to do something in pharmacy, but I actually looked at my undergraduate experience also as a way to build my toolbox. So I majored in Spanish and I use that as, a bilingual healthcare professional now. And it's so important to me and it's so core to like my, identity as a professional, because I viewed it as, okay, if I have time and if I can structure my schedule to take all my pre-health requirements and do a full-on different major, study abroad 2 different semesters, work at a nonprofit for another semester in another country, then this will equip me really well as another tool that I could use later in my life.
And we're in charge of that. No one will do it for us. No company will see our potential like we can and like we frame it. And so instead of sticking with the norm of like creating a resume that's really compelling with like the keywords of like excellent customer service, premier problem solving, now we live in an age where you're creating your own brand and your own influence in the world and taking all the experiences life has given you and thrown at you for good and bad to make you incomparable and unstoppable, which is so fun. And it's almost a creative pursuit that makes you really think differently. And most people don't think this way. But those who do can like set themselves up as the perfect person for the job where before, with the exact same skills and experiences, would feel unqualified. Which leads me to my next point. Swathi, let's talk about making yourself stand out and creating your own brand. Because I know just hearing the words like make yourself stand out is making most people in healthcare like cringe and like, oh, that sounds like a nightmare. I got into this position so I don't have to put myself out there. I don't want to be salesy. I don't want any limelight on me. I hate social media. I just want to like have people find me and give me money without having to put myself out there and like be honest and vulnerable and take a stand for something because that might make enemies. Why do you actually have to do that to be relevant into the future?
Personal brand, I think people get really intimidated by that terminology because they think, oh my God, do I need to have a logo? Do I need to have a website? Honestly, no. In this day and age, I don't think you do. I think that you need to prioritize who you are and how you can share that with other people. And I think one of the best ways to do that, which Jamie, you're an expert at, is LinkedIn. Is how can you share your experience and connect with people in that way? Maybe some people are not ready to, post things like the way that you do in a public forum, but maybe instead it's networking with different people on a one-on-one basis. Maybe it's just direct messaging. And that's something that I talk about all the time, that there's different ways to personal brand. It's not necessarily having this, beautiful curated Instagram or posting 3 times a day on LinkedIn. It's about, who you are and standing confident in who you are and then feeling comfortable with sharing that with others. But it doesn't have to be in such a public way. It could be, making this, I used to have this rule in residency years ago, but that, every single week I would send, 10 cold DMs on LinkedIn. And there are people I didn't know. Oftentimes there were people I had zero mutual connections with. And I was just like, I'm going to message these people and you never know who's going to respond. Honestly, for the most part, I would say maybe 60 to 70% respond. And the people who don't, they're never going to send you, this is something I tell students all the time, they're never going to send you something rude or weird or say stop messaging me. They'll just mark you unread and then not respond. So you have literally nothing to lose by putting yourself out there. So I think again, we're kind of mentioning reframing these, ideas, but it's reframing the idea of personal branding as a way of being confident in yourself and putting yourself out there. The other thing too is, and you even mentioned it in the question, is oh, I'm just going to post this thing and people will just show up and they'll come and they'll show up with dollar signs. And that's not necessarily the case also. I think that there's this misconception, especially within healthcare, that we don't want to come off as bragging, but I think that we need to not refer to it as bragging and more sharing our experience, sharing our accomplishments, sharing things that we're proud of. And yes, maybe to others who are insecure, it does look like bragging, but I think that you need to be confident in what you can provide and also be able to show up and share that. And that looks different for every single person. And I think that it's fully okay if you don't want to post publicly, but you need to do something to start getting yourself out there and getting yourself known. Because that's one of the first things people will do when you apply to a job, even if it's a conventional job. I know we're talking about more on the unconventional side, but even if it's a conventional job, they're going to Google you. They're going to see if you have a LinkedIn, if you have any sort of social media platforms, of course, to ensure you're not posting anything offensive, but, for nothing else or for no other reason, but to just see who is this person and, if they have this ability to, have a LinkedIn, if they are posting, if they're doing something that's putting themselves out there, I think that shows a level of confidence that people want in their employees as well. So it's not just about, creating your own brand and being an entrepreneur or any of that. It's about, how you are going to showcase what you can provide, even if it is to a conventional healthcare professional or a conventional, job or employer. The other thing I wanted to mention about that too is that something that I think also we as healthcare professionals are not generally, excited about is that it's okay if not everyone likes you. And I think that's not even necessarily just healthcare professionals, that's everyone. It's okay if not everyone likes you. And I mean, there's a great quote out there that I don't remember, of course, right now, but there's a great quote that says something like, if someone has like sent you a message or something, someone says something controversial to you that like, oh, I didn't like that or something like that, it's better to get that response and elicit some sort of conversation or discussion, and to have someone think and like be provoked, so to speak, enough to say something rather than not say anything at all.
And you read my mind, Swathi. I was thinking the same thing, that truly it's not just for people who want to build a business and build an empire. Like, anyone to be relevant now in today's world with social media and the internet, like, you need to at least have some semblance of a brand, even if it's not a company. It doesn't have to be tied to your own company. You don't have to form an LLC, but you have to be known for a small group of topics combined with your personality and your unique outlook that makes you different than the rest of the world, to set yourself up for the positions that you want. Because as you know, we both love LinkedIn and have seen the power of LinkedIn. And so many times I've seen it play out how people ask me for a referral, or they're looking for the right person for this position. And I'll say, oh, you need to know this person. Like, they are the pharmacist. And they're like, oh, great, I'll talk to them. And then they get a contract position that's never going to be posted publicly. It's all, so much is word of mouth and who you know. And when you start talking about a few subjects, even from the very beginning, even if you're like, I'm not an expert, but I'm really into like psychedelic medications, or I'm really into cannabis, I'm really into understanding how to help patients safely use cannabis, or, start getting a specific topic, then you become the expert, even if you're not feeling like an expert. If you love talking about a topic and can combine your educational background, your unique outlook with helping people solve a problem, that's what makes you relevant in today's world. Otherwise, you're just always going to be chasing for the lowest dollar, fighting for resumes with like the most letters after your name. And that's a losing battle.
I know. And that's another thing too, is like, I know your audience is probably mainly healthcare professionals, mainly pharmacists. Just because you're a PharmD doesn't mean like you're like every other PharmD also. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is like, it kind of ties in with the idea of personal branding, is that everyone is different and everyone has a different perspective. So you might have gone to the same pharmacy school, you might live in the same town as someone else, but your perspective and the way that you think and what you can provide is going to be different. And so don't put yourself out of the running for something.
Yeah, and don't assume that like, oh, this one person talks about this one topic I'm interested in, therefore the market is saturated, I have nothing to provide. There's how many? 8 billion people in the world, and almost all of them have an internet connection. All you need to do is help a small group of them. Extremely, extremely small. One of my favorite examples we just had on recently was the prednisone pharmacist. She's built an entire career based on the side effects of one medication, and it's a booming business. So it's proof that like there is no subject too small to help people in. And that really rolls into the last final point. Dr. Swathi talked to me about pharmacy is still an amazing option for 3 reasons. The third reason being help people in a unique way, break the status quo and help people in a way that's different. Talk with me about the resources that you've created in the company you built, and how you're not only talking about doing that, but you're actually doing that in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so much of it goes back to, when I was a student and, even a new career professional. And it was resources that I wish I had. It was resources or products or anything that, I felt like I was missing or that I wanted. I kind of turned around, found the right co-founders, found the right people, and really like cultivated that option now for other people. So, through one of the examples, when I would work with patients and give recommendations, and I was working with them from an integrative standpoint. So they would, want me to review their medications. And then after that, they would tell me, XYZ is what I want help with. So then we'd go through and I would have my recommendations or suggestions on, different things they should do for nutrition and sleep hygiene, and also supplements and over-the-counter options. So, when we got to that point, I found myself recommending a lot of different supplements that I think could be a good option. I always think people should start with 1 or 2 and then go from there. Like, never start with like 17 or even 7 or even 4. You should always start with one or two and then go from there, just so you can kind of monitor the effects. But one of the things that I found was that I was interested in recommending cannabinoids for quite a few people, but I was also interested in recommending botanicals. And so I didn't find a lot of products on the market that at the time were really incorporating both in the same formulation. And so I found the right co-founders and we decided to start Element Apothic. And so we launched products in 2020 and we're slowly but surely growing. We are direct to consumer for the most part and branching into about 15, 20 places retail by the end of this quarter. So we're slowly but surely growing, but it's been incredible. And through that experience, I've learned so much already of being a business owner and what it means to be chief scientific officer. And really at our company, that means heading up all things education. So education for consumers, for patients, for providers, for anyone really, for patients. And then on the other side is really all things product development and product innovation. And so what I found through those experiences are these are experiences I wish I had when I was in pharmacy school, to even get a little look into what it means to have a small business with a co-founder that's a pharmacist who's every single day I use my pharmacy knowledge, like things that I learned in pharmacy school, things I learned in residency. It's just, using it in a more innovative, different way, like evaluating primary literature. What does this mean for, the modern scope of medicine, asking questions like that. And so one of the things at the company that I'm so proud of now is 2 internship programs that we have. And so they're the scientific communications internship program and the R&D internship program. And so we recruit for these every October to April. We have our interns come through to kind of mirror the school schedule. And we have doctor of pharmacy students, doctor of medicine students, nutritionist students, bioengineering students, anyone who sees the job posting online who is interested in potentially learning about the startup world, interested in learning more about the natural medicines world, then they can be our interns. So I actually just finished up our recent cohort, our 3rd cohort already. They finished up in April. And we had 6 interns from all over the US. Everything is fully virtual. It was even fully virtual before COVID, but it's so important to me to be able to be one of the people that can provide those opportunities, because I would have loved to do something like that in pharmacy school, to just start learning about what it means to be on the R&D side at, a supplement company, what it means to also think about, why we're choosing certain ingredients or the stability of certain ingredients, thinking about compounding in that way, and in a fun, innovative way, in a way that we can help patients, and also thinking about from a scientific communication standpoint, how can we articulate all these complicated, primary literature articles to patients in a way that's engaging, in a way that's interesting, and also a way that's keeping up with the times. So it's not necessarily, blog content or white papers. It's also, let's think about how we can articulate this on TikTok and make it interesting. So, it's thinking about how we can meet the consumer where they're at, but also doing it in a scientifically driven way. And so, yeah, that's one of the things I've been working on. I've also had a chance to be involved in quite a few online courses with great, co-writers as well and collaborators. So I launched the first course, the first course was Cannabis Therapeutics, Cannabis Science and Therapeutics for pharmacists. And so that one was actually the first online course for pharmacists interested in learning about cannabis and cannabis medicine. So yeah, that was really a great experience and my first foray into online courses. And I have since gone on to create quite a few other ones. We just launched CBD for Health and Wellness, which is the first consumer-focused and kind of healthcare practitioner widespread focus course that's through the brand, through Element Apothic. So it's really just, as a brand now especially, and with the way that the consumers are kind of thinking about, I think we're in the age of the conscious consumers, what we call them. And so, they're interested in not only having products, but they're also interested in, tell me more about these products, like why these ingredients, what's the history of these ingredients, are they safe? How can I use them? What are the doses? Like all these really important questions. And so, a lot of the online courses that I've created up to this point, and I see that for the foreseeable future as well, is they're all kind of based on questions I got over and over and over again from different populations of people to be like, oh, wow, this is a question I'm getting over and over again. like, let me create something that then people can access, self-paced, lifetime access, they can learn whenever they want to. And then, that's kind of spiraled into other things too, which is just spiraled has a negative connotation, but it's kind of evolved into, like a lot of other incredible things. One of the other courses that I started was Integrative Health 101, and that was in collaboration with, my mentor, my residency program director. We wanted to work together again, and we put together this live webinar series all about different modalities of integrative health, specifically for pharmacists. And from there, we decided to record them and post them online, and that's been going really well. I feel very grateful for that. So there's a lot of, really great opportunities right now. I think if we, especially, think of 3 points that you're talking about, it's, how do we use our unique skill sets in interesting, engaging, innovative ways that can really give back and help people.
And it's just fun to do. Not only is it like good for our career and helps us do things we couldn't do and influence more people for good, but I just find it's just genuinely fun. And that's my biggest driver, that it's just fun, and it's a creative expression, and it's the act of creating something and figuring out how it evolves rather than like muscling your way to brilliant entrepreneurial success. It's equal parts like fun and interesting, as well as like, okay, this is helping people. How do I do this better? It's just a joy to be myself today and authentically myself, because I know working in a traditional role, I did a good job for the role that it was, but it was like 10% of my capacity as a human to help people with my interests, my personality, and my way of connecting with people. So thank you for sharing your story. Last question for you, Dr. Swathi. You are a wealthy white coat, and you have wealth in so many areas of your life. In what area of your life are you actively building wealth, like today?
Ooh, that's a great question. So, I also love the term wealth because it's, the wealth in the conventional way of, building financial wealth. And I'm also, thinking about, as we talked about in the way beginning, of like different opportunities, ways to try new things. So I'm experimenting, and I'll let you know the next time I come back or we reconnect. I can tell you, what I've been thinking about, what I've been kind of messing around with and thinking about, what's maybe, something else I want to try and use my skills in a different way. So that's, I guess kind of on the WEALTH side. But then, I also like thinking about wealth as in WELLTH. So I'm, every single day building, my wealth and my toolbox there of, what I can do every single day to feel my best. So that's, really important to me as well, to be both kinds of wealthy. And so I know people always talk about balance, but to me, like, I need balance every day. It's not, like working really hardcore for 4 weeks and taking a four-day vacation. It's like, I need a balance every single day to feel like a sane human being. And so that's, what I've been working on is like, how can I build, moments of wealth, WELLTH, and also, moments or like 30-minute blocks or hour blocks and, things like that to really feel my best.
And as part of that, I'm right after we hit stop on recording, I'm going to go out and go on a walk around the block, because I've been working for like 6 hours today, and I'm already starting to feel like, okay, I'm tired. And so one of my favorite things to do is just walk and think and move. So I'm going to do that too. That's a good idea.
Amazing. Yeah, I just did that before.
Thanks for joining us. We'll include all the links to connect with you directly if people are like, wow, I love what she's talking about. I'm interested in checking more of that out. All of her links will be in the show notes below, so check those out to learn more about Dr. Swathi and her journey. Thank you for joining us today.